Great. Welcome to our panel on 360 VR video streaming in 2017. We have a great panel which I will introduce after a short introduction on the topic, what we see out there right now, what we see out there in trends, and where is 360 degree and VR in 2017. So use cases range from professional content to news to sports to concerts. VR is entering the main podcast market in 2017. The cameras are there, the stitching solutions are there, the delivery technologies are there. It's a great year for VR, and we will see now really the time where either business models will be established or we go down the route of, for example, 3D and other technologies like that. However, I don't think that that will happen with VR and 360 degree because it's more immersive just from the availability of cameras, for example. So how a typical workflow looks like for 360 degree and VR. You have a camera with multiple lenses. We have, for example, here Nokia is one vendor of these cameras. The main challenge here is to stitch those different cameras together to one 360 degree representation. That's a big challenge and a lot of computational effort. And then we use state-of-the-art encoders like H.264 codecs, for example, and video delivery solutions like MPEG-Dash and HLS. And we render it again to the screen, to the headset, or to the smartphone or whatever device we use for playback of 360 degree content. So currently for the spherical domain, like 360 degree is spherical, we enter a new concept of video streaming, so where different parts of the video are not rendered. And that's not necessarily what today's technologies are built for. So currently we just try to fit in and squeeze in 360 degree in rectangular formats. And that's a shortcoming of the codecs we're using. So here we really have to work on something new, on something beyond also 360 degree, like point cloud codecs or spherical codecs, which is ongoing in standardization in MPEG and in other consortia. As mentioned, current trends are adaptive streaming, definitely, with HLS and MPEG-Dash, where the main challenge is how to reach all devices. So of course, headsets are fancy and great, but not everybody has a $1,000 headset with a $3,000 computer to run it at home. So the main focus right now, what we see, is mobile devices, smartphones, and also cheap headsets where you can use the smartphone in, like Google Cardboard or a Samsung Gear VR, for example. Or just a simple smartphone like an iPhone. It is not that easy as you might think to stream 360 degree to the iPhone. And last but not least, we have a challenge on the DRM side. With current web technologies, it's not possible to DRM protect 360 degree content right now because you access the frame to render it. And this breaks, obviously, the DRM concept when you access the frame. That's something where we need to have some work in standardization, in standards for decoding and decrypting, and primarily here the media source extension and encrypted media extensions. There are also trends out there that are fancy and highly popular, like the pyramid approach, which sounds like an optimization step for 360 degree content, where you focus on the visible parts of the viewpoint and decrease and subsample parts that are not viewed. However, this concept is quite popular, but nobody does it actually at the moment. I am happy to hear something different from the panelists, but I'm pretty sure nobody does that in production because you result in about 150 different representations of the content. So not everything that's shiny is gold, so that's exactly here the case. And it's also not possible to live stream with that approaches. And what we see out there is that we have to pay attention to the specifics of 360 degree, especially that the full 360 degree area has to be stored and delivered in the one way or another, and also in the specifics of the viewpoint. If I want to deliver a viewpoint in 4K, for example, I need a 12 by 6K frame, and that's crazy to deliver with today's streaming and internet infrastructure. So we have to do something more intelligent, And streaming technologies and streaming organizations and bodies in standardization look into that. One of the most promising approaches we see out there is tile-based streaming, where you split up, for example, the frame into different tiles and just deliver the viewpoint in the best quality. That's something that's currently ongoing in MPEG, for example, and in a couple of other startups out there. You see them popping up quite quickly at the moment. And the basic principle is you split up the different qualities in different tiles and just deliver the tiles that are actually seen. And with that approach, you can really focus on the viewport and can deliver the viewport as the best quality and decrease, for example, or skip parts that are not seen. Examples for that could look like this, where the center image, the center part of the image is streamed, and you decrease the quality for the outer parts, so you can still turn around, for example, in the 360-degree environment and don't lose any quality. And if you change your viewpoint, then you can adjust the quality again for the new viewpoint position. That's something supported by today's infrastructure like MPEG-Dash and HEVC, and there are a couple of providers out there in the market that enable that. But to really go into real VR, also with more degrees of freedom than 360-degree offers, we need new technologies, new codecs like light field and point cloud or multi-view codecs. And that's something where we simply have to dig into more detail. Some companies, like for example 8i is a great example here, are doing that. So they are early and proprietary, but I think we need a little bit more standardized out there in the world to enable those more immersive experience for natural content, for video content. So I hope I gave you a quick intro to the topic and to the challenges that we see. And now I'm happy to introduce the panel. We have 4 great panelists that I will introduce now, and everybody will talk a little bit about himself, his background, and what they expect from VR. So first in the list is Devon Copley, head of product VR platform, also from Nokia Technologies.
Thanks, Stefan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Just a little bit of background on myself. I'm responsible for the products that Nokia has released recently that are downstream of the Ozo camera. So those of you who are familiar with 360 probably have heard of the Nokia Ozo camera, the first integrated professional camera. It's been in the market for a year, but we've expanded our set of technologies beyond just capture to the Ozo Reality platform, which is something that we announced just 2 weeks ago at NAB. We are essentially providing a suite of technologies to solve, or at least initially address, a number of the challenges that Stefan just laid out around low bandwidth delivery of high resolution content, but beyond that, to also incorporate other immersive technologies as well. Our belief is that the challenge is not really just about bandwidth reduction, but at the broader level, being able to provide a fully immersive experience to a broader audience. You know, to our mind, bandwidth reduction is as much about increasing the number of, the amount of the audience you can hit as anything else. So the Reality platform goes beyond just high resolution video to provide stereoscopic encoding enhancements, as well as depth layer carriage for mixed reality and 6 DOF applications, as well as spatial audio carriage and potentially object audio carriage and rendering. So it's a suite of technologies that we're working with a coalition of partners to bring to market, folks like Elemental, Harmonic, Akamai, New Lion, even Hulu, to sort of try to solve some of these issues that creators are having in order to get the quality they can actually capture all the way through to the point of consumption.
Great, thank you. Next panelist, Tony Mugavero, I hope I pronounced it right, CEO of Littlstar, one of the leading 360-degree content platforms out in the market, and a cool startup from New York.
Thanks, Stefan. Yeah, so Littlstar was founded mid-2014, and entirely around the premise of making it easy for content owners to create content, just focus on the creation of content, and they would just send us master assets, and we would make it easy, very easy, to distribute that content out to consumers. So we built a consumer-facing discovery portal for 360-degree content. And so that's how we operate today. Essentially, big content owners like NBC, ABC, Fox, Discovery, Nat Geo, Sony Pictures, Universal Pictures will send us master assets, and then we'll distribute that through the Littlstar applications. And you can get those applications on the PlayStation, Rift, Gear, Vive, forthcoming Microsoft headsets. We were a global launch partner with Sony on the PlayStation VR, Google on Daydream. So we spend all of our time gluing those worlds together of head-mounted displays and basically targeting the top end of what the display itself can handle. And then on the content side, someone will send us a 200 gigabyte uncompressed file, and we'll make sure that we prepare it in such a way that it goes to all those devices in the best way possible. That includes some experimentation with volumetric captured content as well, and so the ability to have 6 degrees of freedom and some additional layers on top of that. But that's kind of where we sit in the ecosystem.
Great, thank you. Then Glenn Goldstein from Viacom.
Yeah, so I run the enterprise, I think this sounds good. I run the enterprise architecture team at Viacom and also the video distribution platform. We've looked at Viacom, and this is across the consumer-facing brands of MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, Comedy Central, those popular brands. And we are very much in the mode now of converging our approach to creating linear television, creating digital streaming, and then we've kind of combined our groups together. I'm probably coming at this more like your typical Streaming Media East audience member or participant. I come from the traditional internet streaming world, so 360 video, VR, a lot of that's new for me. I'm just learning it up as well. But I've been involved with internet streaming at Viacom since the early days of real media streaming, 20 kilobit type video, of which 8 was audio, so it was really only 12 for the video. And so we've been doing adaptive bitrate for a long time, and it's fascinating for me to see all these concepts that we've been tossing around for adaptive bitrate streaming now sort of making their way to 360 video. So it's exciting times.
And last but not least, Andrew Asnes, founder and creative director of RoundHill VR.
Hi, everybody. RoundHill VR is an immersive creative company. We make 360 content, we live stream, we also create productions that are post-produced as well. We've worked on various projects for different arts companies, different television broadcast companies, and we've done some live streaming, most recently with the Zcam products, the S1. We love the Nokia suite and the Nokia products. They create an incredible image. They allow for an immersive experience that's really unrivaled at this point. But the crazy thing about this industry is, every month new technologies are coming out, new people are entering the market. Companies that made cameras for many years are now starting to think about how they can enter into this world. My point of view is strictly from the creation side. How do you get the best image quality? How do you get the best content available for consumption? Because we're in a vacuum of, we're sort of in the chicken and egg phase of this industry. There are only so many headsets out there. There's only so much content out there for consumption. And as it grows, more and more people will enter, but you have a lot of people saying, oh, the expense is too high to buy an HMD right now. And combined with, I don't really have enough content for me to enjoy. So as more people enter into this world and more camera makers enter, you're going to see a much broader group of content available for consumption. And I kind of just, that's where we live in trying to create the best content available for anyone to see.
Great, thank you. So I would love to open the panel discussion with our first question. So how does 360-degree video fit into the broader set of technologies for creating VR, AR, MR experiences? Maybe, Devon, you want to start with your point on that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, that's a fun question. I think there's a while ago there was a big argument over whether 360 video is VR or if it's not, right? That was the kind of thing that Facebook trolls were getting very upset about. I think 360 video fits into a spectrum of things that you can do in VR. And what's, I think, most compelling today about 360 video is that it's very accessible. It's very easy to create, relatively speaking. It's easy to produce using existing tools. And while there are a lot of challenges for distribution, fundamentally it follows along existing video distribution and rendering kinds of capabilities. So I think that makes it really accessible, and it also, you know, unlike the sort of game engine-based VR, it's actually placing you into an actual place. So you've seen, you know, documentary filmmakers and journalists really embrace it as a medium because it, you know, allows you to really capture a moment in time or a place. Does it immerse you enough in that place? I think that's the challenge that we see now. I think everybody agrees that monoscopic video projected on a phone that's strapped to your face is not the best endpoint for that you know, experience. So what is that endpoint, and is it still going to be video when we get there? I don't know. To me, that's the most interesting question, is that what 360 video does now is it allows a wide variety of people to create content that can be consumed in headsets with not a lot of effort. There will be ways to do that in the future. Will that still be video at all? Is, to me, that's the interesting question.
It's an interesting point, especially when it comes to 60 degree of freedom content. Is it video? Is it something else that's rendered? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that I think it is going to move into the direction where 360 content is integrated into interactive experiences. You already have a lot of companies like Liquid Cinema and Entry Point VR doing web VR experiences, which are interactive 360 content. So you're inside of a concert and you want to, and you see something and there's an interactive element to the space that they've created, and you can click on it and now you're into another part of the experience. Maybe it's a backstage, a behind the scenes kind of thing. Additionally, there are people working with incorporating 360 content into Unreal engines and into in game engines so that they can create more interactivity within an app-based 360 content experience. And then you have companies like UVisit, which create these incredible experiences for their clients where, you know, they have this technology called Through the Looking Glass that a friend of mine made. And you're basically in a room that was created digitally, and it looks like a real room. And on the wall is a frame, and it's a picture frame. And when you click on the picture frame, you zoom right in and enter into a 360-degree video experience. Clients use that for tourism and hotels and things like that, so people can experience what it's going to be like to visit a place like that. But they've also used it for more empathic experiences like visiting Syrian refugees and things of that nature. So I think it will move in that direction. You have Facebook and Metal partnering up to create tools for depth mapping within 360 content so that you're going to be able to use a Nokia Ozo to take an incredible image, and then the software is going to be able to know the depth and the space between you so that you can move slightly behind. You know, you can already do that with light field technologies, but the new camera that Facebook unveiled, the 6-lens and 24-lens camera, are going to allow for that kind of content to be created, and I think that's going to make it even more compelling for people to get involved.
I'm going to go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and say that people are lazy. And VR is awesome. I have every headset. We have 10 of them at our office, and we play, you know, games and Sword Fight and Resident Evil, and we do it all. But people are lazy. And so basic 360 video, the very simple underlying core piece of content, is very easy to consume for some people who just want to sit there on their couch. and not move their head very much and not stand up and fight their friends. And so we've had that opportunity. We've had that opportunity to have branching narrative with, you know, Flash players and on the web. And we've had the Kinect and we've had the Wii. And we see what happens over time is that those things are kind of nice up front, but like it always kind of simmers down into, I have a controller in my lap and I'm sitting on the couch. Or I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching Netflix just stream in the background because I don't want to be standing up in the middle of my room. And so, you know, Devon hit it on the head and said that there's a spectrum. There definitely is a spectrum. You want to be standing, I mean, we have room scale at our office with a Vive, and there's people swinging their arms around painting, and it's awesome. But then there are some times when you just want to sit there and lean back and watch a cartoon and be in the middle of it. And that's cool too. So, you know, we see there's the business opportunities, but there's also, you know, the simplicity of it, and the business opportunities around the simplicity of it. And not trying to overcomplicate things just for the sake of overcomplicating it, because there is a spectrum, and a lot of what we find from a business perspective and selling this internally to large organizations from, you know, a technology perspective and a streaming perspective, and the more complexity you bring into big organizations right now and try to explain that it needs to have all of this additional layers of framework in there that you have to adopt. All that increased complexity and increased cost actually creates friction inside the organization and kills the initiative before it even happens. So we find those simple 360 videos have done really well because, one, it makes it easy to kind of bridge the gap and say, all right, this isn't going to cost too much, and it's something I kind of already understand, it's video, and it's something that we can actually execute on. Instead of going in there and saying, hey, we got to build all of this, we got to build this stuff in Unity, it's a game engine, and you know, it's going to be great. And you know, the NBC execs are going to be like, nah, that's not what we do. You know, so it's like, it's a little bit of, it depends on who you're talking to and how you're approaching it, but we've seen it die on the inside when people are trying to push. There's internal champions, usually on the digital team, who are pushing these initiatives internally at big networks or studios or whatever, and it dies because they overcomplicate it. And so, you know, when I say represent the other end of the spectrum, I mean like try to keep it as simple as possible, and you know, take it from there. You can always push farther into more complexity, but you know, that's.
So Tony, when you're saying the other end of the spectrum, you didn't go where I was expecting you to go, which was to handheld mobile. Magic
Right.
Window, desktop.
Right.
I mean, I think if we were all here a year ago, I certainly would not have predicted the degree to which that medium has really taken
Magic
off.
Window's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
Well, I'll add a small point to that, but yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that we saw in getting any deals done and getting Littlstar off the ground is that 360 video bridged the gap between VR headsets, which are non-existent in the market, or a very small portion of the market. But when you say, yeah, you can get your video on 2 billion smartphones, all of a sudden everybody's like, you know, when we went in to meet with Viacom for the first time, we have an agreement with them, by the way. When we went in to meet with them for the first time, they didn't even put on a VR headset. They had our Apple TV app on the TV, looking around in 360 video, because that's something that they could understand and it's easy to bridge the gap. So just that simple little thing made a huge difference.
And
Well, at Viacom, we like to put stuff on big flat TVs in the front of the
Exactly.
room. You know, we love that model. You know.
That's exactly a perfect example for Viacom. So you guys have exactly this content, leaning back on the couch, watching a cartoon. What's your take on 360 degree and VR? And
Yeah, so, well, to your original question, is 360 video VR, I actually like that we sort of all have now focused on the term 360 video. It's exactly accurate description of what it is. I think people can get their head around that. It's 360 video. It might be consumed in a VR environment, or it might be consumed in an AR environment, or the Magic Window, or any of those sort of things. Generally, we've been, for anything we're going to put out in front of the public in any real meaningful way, we've been aiming, to your point, to the sort of the bottom end, you know, just straight up 360 video, rectangular, nothing fancy, none of the, you know, the newer projection schemes. Straight up on YouTube, some of it out through Littlstar, generally being consumed through the magic window technique or through, you know, cheap, you know, displays. And that's been going pretty well for us. It's a lot of, like at Bellator, we're doing a lot of things for the mixed martial arts, behind the scenes, little audience cam types of things, stunts, concerts, again, red carpet camera, behind the scenes sort of things. There's been very little interest in the company in live VR, but I think the VR streaming, but I think that'll change, and I bet soon we'll do a live VR streaming stunt. There's also been interest now, they've been starting to do what I guess I would call mixed reality, of doing an edit after the stitch and actually injecting an object into the scene that wasn't really in there, maybe a product placement, something like that. There's been, we've talked a little bit about 360 advertising. You know, what does a mid-roll ad mean in this environment? Yeah. And people have generally determined that it would be cheesy and not a good idea to take you out of a 360 video experience, and now it's time for a mid-roll, and put a flat virtual screen in front of you and watch your mid-roll. If you're going to do it, the mid-roll is going to have to be 360, but you don't see a lot of advertisers producing 15-second 360 spots, but I think that may change as well. So for consumer-facing, we're kind of aiming low, but then, you know, Viacom needs to have its name out there and wants to do some high-concept type pieces as well that can be shown off or can be tickle people's fancy for newer ideas. So on that front, we have a group called Viacom Next that builds a lot of VR experiences for the Vive and for the, you know, fancier equipment. There we have partnered with Microsoft, and we're using some of their volumetric mapping. We have a title that we showed at South by Southwest. I think it's titled Chocolate. It's a great volumetric capture of a musician. They shot him multiple times playing all the instruments. So he's the whole band. He's the drummer, he's the bass player, he's the keyboardist, he's the singer, and they shot him doing all this stuff, multiple takes, and then we put it all together in a volumetric capture experience, and you're looking at this guy on the stage, 5 copies of him, and you can walk around. And I think when you get those sort of degrees of freedom in a VR environment, where you're walking behind him, you're walking in front of him, it's a whole eye-opener. We're also doing some stuff in the Microsoft HoloLens. I think it's fascinating there, you know, the magic window approach in Microsoft HoloLens. You know, I'm here in the room, I'm looking at you in the room, but as I pan my head around, I'm seeing this virtual window of some other piece of video. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there as well.
Very interesting. So
sort of going low for actually getting something out there, and going high, really more in the lab and for demonstration. I think that's where we are.
I think that's a common approach we see also in the market. Also, the use cases are very, very interesting, and that leads us to the next question. What are the actual use cases for VR? Is it sports? Is it events? Is it backstage, for example? Is it music? Is it on-demand entertainment where you lay back in the evening, for example, and just watch a movie or so? Is it long-form content, short-form content? What's your take? What we will see in 2017, 18, and beyond from the use cases?
I could just briefly say that we've done some stuff with panel events with well-known. I did something for Futurism on their Facebook page. We live streamed a panel with a NASA astronaut. It did extremely well. A lot of people tuned in. They were jazzed by being sort of in the room, right? That's I think the experience that 360 streaming gives you. We're talking to some Broadway shows about potentially doing some sort of actual transactional ticketing. Virtual tickets. To something. I love that concept. It would be amazing because if you could get, you'd get a seat in the theater that you can't get anywhere else. There are a lot of challenges in that arena, and so we're trying to tackle them. We may not end up shooting on Broadway. We may shoot some other location, a touring location or something like that. So
would they create artificial scarcity of the tickets then, even though really there's no scarcity?
I don't think so. I think that, I don't think we're in a place in the market where there are enough people who will be dissuaded from going to the live show because they'll tune in on to a virtual broadcast. That may happen, which then could create a problem.
But there's a huge price gap there between the cheapest ticket and nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for price discrimination there.
And there are shows that you may not go to because you don't necessarily want to go with your family to see a show that's racy, but you tune in on a headset or you tune in on your device. You'd sit in your Apple TV Littlstar app and sit there, scrolling through it. So that's a use case. There's a company called Live Like VR, which does a lot of sports, which is amazing stuff. You can watch an event with a friend in another place in the world that you may not be able to access at home. There's a ton of use cases, but we've only done stuff mainly in the arts and with some panel kind of events, more event-structured use cases.
I'm curious to hear from Tony, because, he's got a giant platform with a bunch of content on it. What's coming in and what are people consuming and how, and what's the differential there, right?
Yeah, the music content does really well. Music meaning that people are now actually creating music videos that are the whole song in 360 degrees. And
it's a good length.
Yeah, it's just a few minutes. And so we see a lot of usage there. Documentary style stuff does really well, particularly if it's given that it's a really tough subject. So what's it like to be a Syrian refugee, for example? As depressing as that may be, it does engage people because they really get a sense of what it's like to be there. And empathy is such an overused word in the VR space. You guys might not have heard. How many people, first of all, have used a VR headset? Oh, good. All right, good. Sometimes it's like 2 people, so just want to make sure. But yeah, so we see a lot of the docu-style stuff working really well. Music, anything that's behind the scenes. Another thing that's great about the format is that it gives the opportunity to be close to the person that is in the film. So they can break the fourth wall and start talking to you, and it feels like you're there with celebrity XYZ. Mm-hmm. So that provides like a really personal connection, whereas if the type of content that comes in places you as a viewer without breaking the fourth wall, then it feels really weird. It feels like you're at a party and nobody's talking to you, which is like a very awkward scenario to be in. So there's these little nuances that help tremendously in making content more powerful, and it just naturally shows with the data. We see it coming through. Sports is difficult because the rights issues there. I think we're a little ways away from that, but Live Like has done some things with Fox, so is Next VR. So we should start to see more of that stuff coming, but Nokia has done a ton in sports too.
We're doing the Champions League final in a couple weeks. Biggest sports event in the world with Delta Tre and UEFA.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that's kind of what we're seeing at the top, but we see a bunch of other things around travel and take me places, basically teleport me out of where I am and put me in the middle of the Grand Canyon, things like that gets people out of their reality and puts them in a different reality.
It's funny, I want you to check me on this, but I feel like initially with 360 video we saw an enormous amount of enthusiasm from Hollywood, from narrative storytelling creators, and I've seen that stuff struggle to get traction.
Yeah.
The documentaries are working, the music is working, sports is working. The narrative stuff, I feel like the directors haven't cracked this new medium yet. They haven't figured out how it works.
I think people, are afraid of that. We talk about that a little bit, certainly within our brands at Viacom. Scripted episodic television, for example, there's this trade-off between having it director-controlled. We want to control the narrative and what you're looking at, versus I think people are afraid if we do it that way. It's like, what if they're looking away? Yeah. But we crafted this story and the characters are over here. So I think that content creators, particularly scripted type programming, whether it would be movies or television, are having a hard time getting their head around that. And it's such a more natural fit for journalism and sports and events, where the whole point is make it feel more like you're there. So I think that's why we're seeing it. But I'm sure somebody will hop on the scripted thing, and then with scripted, it's going to be interesting because you know, do you want to go down the road if people can kind of choose their own storyline, or like more likely everybody's still seeing the same storyline, but people will figure out how to do it in a way where it's okay that people are looking wherever, but it'll be a whole, and maybe volumetric capture may be the way to do that kind of thing as well.
And I'll just add quickly that technically lighting and acting is so different in full 360 degrees. So like, where do you hide the crew?
Yeah.
That's like, you know,
It's
if we were, so, and when you're on a movie set, there's 100 people behind the camera. So that becomes a real challenge. And then the acting, you know, it looks like like in a scripted piece, it looks like almost like a cheesy kind of like soap opera or something that is weirdly lit. And
you might end up with a mixed reality sort of thing where the actors, much like they do all the CG stuff now, they're sitting there in an all green room and they're sort of projected into a 360 video of some scene, and then you they can shoot it the same way they shoot CG, but you may see some of that.
I think that's right. I mean, the question I was getting at the beginning of like whether it still remains video or not, I think what the natural place for VR narrative to go is towards those sort of heavily post-produced CG universes where you do full 8-eye style or, you know, capture of the individual actors, and the scenes are all, you know, photogrammetry rendered, and you can wander through them in 3D. But you can't do that for a football game. You know, you can't do that for a, you know, for Davos. You know, so I think these news and event and sports and, you know, concerts, these things are going to have to be video based, because those other workflows, they're too heavy for those sorts of approaches. So I do think there's going to be a bit of a diversion in between those paths.
I agree, and you know, there are two schools of thoughts in VR. I think there is the observational, like we don't want to tell you where to look. And then there's the cinematic. I'm going to set my shots up specifically so that you see what we want you to see, or at least we hope that you're going to be looking in the direction of the primary action of that scene. You know, news organizations do a lot of the more observational things, but even they are getting smarter about it. CNN did this incredible Running with the Bulls piece where they really thought through their shot list. They really thought about how they would tell the story, and the camera placements tell the story in a really incredibly beautiful way, and it makes it, it's a devastating end because it's incredible because you're really inside the event. However, they didn't just plop the camera down in the middle of a piazza and have all these guys run by you and you have to figure out where to look. They helped you guide your viewpoint by where they placed the camera during the Running of the Bulls. They had one outside, you know, guys holding a camera on a stick from a balcony as they're running down one of the narrow alleyways. And so you're looking at it from above, and it's great because you really can take in what you want to take in, but you're not missing anything. You know, in 360, if Stefan is talking over here and Devon's talking over there, I don't know where to look. You know, CNN did something with the Alvin Ailey Dance Company. They put the camera in the middle of a room and they all danced around, rehearsal. Didn't work. Didn't work for me because I didn't know what I was supposed to look at, and I didn't know where I was supposed to be looking, and I wasn't taking in the piece in any new way. I was just sort of placed there. So I think with scripted, it's really hard. You know, the Invisible series, I don't know if any of you have seen that.
Doug Liman.
Doug Liman, 30 Ninjas, produced and directed the series, which is a thriller. It's a 5-part series, and it's really great. It's only had something like 500 to 700,000 views, you know, and that's great for them. But that's nothing, you know. Bruno Mars just put out a video in 2 days. It's got 250 million views, right? So it's a different environment we're working on, and they're trying to figure out how to tell a story that's going to keep you engaged, keep you coming back for the next episode, that's going to make you want to stream, you know, Game of Thrones. Can we come up with
binge?
Yeah, binge watch on 360 would be amazing, but it's going to take a whole revolution of, it's going to take a whole bunch of the creators to say, wow, I want to invest my time and my money into this. A lot of the people who are doing it now are doing it on the cheap because it costs so much to make these things. So they do it on the cheap, and that's what you get. You get a cheap-looking production with unknown actors, cheesy acting, people who've never really directed actors before stepping into this world, and then you say, oh, this sucks, I don't want to watch it.
Well, you know, long form and binge watching 360 has some issues though, in that it may just be physically exhausting for people. You know, how long are you to keep the headset on? How long are you going to do the magic window sort of thing? And you may get into these sort of director's cut sort of situations where it is a little bit lean back. There is always sort of moving a field of view where you're supposed to look, but at least you can sort of glance up and down and get a full peripheral. And I think we may see peripheral 180. I mean, that could be the thing, is maybe 180 video is where we're going to land, because then it is really a directed experience, but you still get a peripheral view.
That's what the porn industry uses, by the way.
There you go.
3D 180.
Yeah.
We all know what happens when the porn industry adopts them.
So I think we may see a lot of that. Yeah.
So we talked a lot about the production challenges and the use cases. So how to bring this content now to the actual user? What are the main problems you guys face on the streaming, on the rendering side, on the technology side? And yeah, I would be curious to hear your experiences here.
Well, that's kind of what we do, so I'm happy to field that. You know, I think the baseline is that there are bottlenecks at every point of the pipeline. Whether you're talking about encode or ingest or transcode or deliver or render, at all these places, you know, the various components are only just becoming capable of carrying 4K frames, much less being able to do higher resolution. I mean, and then, so just to take some examples, right? Even in the capture side, the design of the original, of the Ozo camera, you know, back in 2014 or when the guys were building it, was constrained by the data throughput rate to the SSD drive. We couldn't find an SSD drive that was fast enough to record from 8 sensors simultaneously. Right? I mean, and these are the kinds of problems you see all the way through the pipeline. I mean, you know, a lot of the low-end devices now, yeah, they can play back, you know, VR video, but they overheat in 10 minutes. You know, even I have the latest Google Pixel phone. It can't play back, you know, 360 stereo video for more than 10 or 15 minutes without giving up the ghost. And these are, you know, even to attain the sort of baseline level of capability that we have today. So from our perspective at Nokia, we're just trying to knock down those barriers one at a time across the entire pipeline. So, you know, the viewport adaptive streaming capability is a key part of that, because it allows you to reduce, you know, 4K, 6K, 8K frame down to component parts that are easier to send and that are easier to decode. So for example, you know, we can now decode, you know, a dual 4K or even a 6K. I shouldn't say 6K, it's not quite working yet, but dual 4K, so 4K per eye on a Samsung S6, even though it only has a single 4K hardware encoder. So because we're not actually really decoding the full sphere all at once, we can present that experience on lighter weight equipment. And that kind of thing has to happen, you know, all the way through. So there's a combination of like brute force upgrades of, you know, compute power and delivery pipeline, but also cleverer use of the capabilities that we have in order to get there. But it's going to be step by step. It's going to be painful. This stuff has to roll out through the entire ecosystem, and it's going to take time.
Interesting. So anybody using new codecs like HEVC or VB9 or EV1 in those deployments, or are you mainly developing on H.264?
So we're developing simultaneously on HEVC and H.264. HEVC offers a lot of advantages for offline, but some key disadvantages. The first one is that the PlayStation doesn't decode HEVC. So start there, right? So that already means if you're playing in VR, you need to be in PlayStation, and that means you need to be in H.264. And then also, we do a lot of live. We feel like live is a really important you know, use case. Live encoders for HEVC, we've tested them all. We haven't seen any that are actually better than H.264. HEVC can be better if you use more process, but especially for, you know, for live encoding, and I'm sure you have something to say about that. You know, you can multiplex it in the cloud, I suppose, and do better there. Exactly. But for on-site encoding, HEVC hasn't done as much good.
I'm curious, when you do the encoding, are you encoding the equirectangular, or are you encoding a cubic or some other projection?
So I know you have a question about projections as well. I mean, we've done a lot of, you know, we have labs guys in Finland who are terrific and who've done a lot of work on different projection types. You know, when, you know, the pyramidal projection that Facebook demonstrates, I'm sure you guys did the similar test. It's actually worse than equirectangular.
Yes.
Yeah. So
great marketing topic.
Yeah, equirectangular is actually pretty good all in all. I think our philosophy is that equirectangular is great for the production process. Yeah. Because you can see it, people are used to it, and then for the actual delivery cycle, yeah, we're playing with a variety of other projection techniques. You can get maybe a 10%.
See, I drank too much Facebook Kool-Aid now. So now, right, I mean, pyramid, right, it's going to be a lot less data to move around, right? And so theoretically, it's more friendly towards the way motion vectors are computed in H.264.
Yeah, so why don't we dive into this, right? Yeah. And Stefan, I think you can also probably help with this. Yeah. So fundamentally, when we talk about what we call viewport adaptive streaming, which is just sending the portion that you're looking at, there's essentially two different major categories of approach. One is what we call a tiled approach, where you slice up the full frame into separate tiles, and you send those tiles as separate streams. There we go, you've got it. All right, you've got slides from me already. The other also doesn't really have a name. We call this tile, you call it tile-based too. Okay, I guess that's the name of it then.
You can tile any projection, right?
Exactly, yeah, you can tile anything, really. And HEVC has some nice capabilities that are designed to support that.
Exactly.
You can do motion-constrained tiles, so you don't have to encode them separately. H.264 does not have that capability, but you can still use similar techniques with H.264. That's what we're doing. That's what Fraunhofer has done. That's what the guys from TNO are doing. Now, we are doing. That's what Bitmovin is doing. What Facebook is doing is what I would characterize as an entirely different approach. We call it asymmetric projection, where you, instead of taking one frame and slice it up, you take that one frame and create many, many variants, maybe 30. I think Facebook does even more than that, that are a smaller frame with a asymmetric projection. So you're having high resolution for one portion of the sphere and then low resolution everywhere else.
It's 150 encodes when you multiply it by the
right.
ACR quality level.
So it's a lot of encodes, it's a lot of storage, it poorly uses the caching capabilities of CDNs, and it doesn't really offer any significant encode benefits over the tile-based approach. And I think, you know, we examined both, Bitmovin examined both, Fraunhofer examined both. We all came to the same conclusion. I'm not sure why the Facebook guys came to a different conclusion, but we feel like the tiled approach is more efficient, it's easier to implement, and it provides all the benefits and none of the downsides of the asymmetric approach.
Great. I think we're hitting the time wall now. So thanks. I think we could have easily done a 2-hour panel on the topic. We only scratched the surface of the questions. Maybe next year, or maybe at Streaming Media West. So thanks for the participation. Thanks for this really, really interesting panel. And thanks for the attention.